Thank you. So, as you can appreciate, monkeypox has been something that's been covered in the press. We have worked quite closely with James Bolton and his team on the call, who have kindly put this piece together. I think Matteo and a few others who are going to be speaking today. The key to this really is to just give you a very clear picture on exactly what's going on, what monkeypox is, where the exposures are, and also the campaigns and work that's being done by the, I've got to get it right, DHSC and NHS on ensuring that everyone is aware of the situation. I'm going to say it very clearly. This is not about panic zones. This is about information sharing so that everyone is fully aware of exactly where this sits. So we're not in a COVID environment. We're not talking about that, but we're just talking very clearly of an update and an information sharing position so that you can come away and really understand exactly the impacts and the effects on your customer base and disseminate information, but also ask questions that you need to ask to the experts that are on this call who have kindly given their time. So without further ado, I'm not going to take up too much time. Can I just pass over to James Bolton, who can sort of orchestrate the webinar, and I'll come off video. James will just do the introductions of the sort of key experts who will take you through the process and then talk to you about available support as well that is out there through NHS and government support networks. So James, can I invite you in just to introduce yourself and lead from here? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. That's a really helpful introduction. I think you covered most things actually. So just for everyone on the call, I'm head of comms at UXA. So I've been working on COVID for the last couple of years, but also working on monkeypox now. I'm not really going to take up any more time. You're here to listen to the experts. So I'm going to hand over first to Matteo from UKHSA. He's going to give an overview of monkeypox and where we are at the moment. Matteo, over to you.
Thanks, James. I'll share my screen. Oh, it seems that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Is that something that can be fixed in order to put the slides?
Yeah, I'll just do it for you, Matteo. But
right.
bear with me 2 seconds. There you go. Yeah, you should be able to share now.
Yeah. And you'll see that. Yes. Great. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the monkeypox situation in the UK, mostly focus on the epidemiology, but also some bits on clinical presentation and what we can do to prevent it from being transmitted onwards so we can control the current outbreak. The first thing to know is that monkeypox is a rare infectious disease. It's not an infectious disease that we see commonly, but it's not a new infectious disease. It's an infectious disease that has been described before, especially in some regions of West and Central Africa. It's usually a virus that is transmitted in animal reservoirs, but that sometimes can jump to humans and spread through close contact. It's been described to be transmitted usually in households in some countries that have endemic outbreaks, that have endemicity. But in more recent weeks or months, it's been identified in a multitude of countries across the world, usually countries that do not have traditional transmission of monkeypox. And the way in which the virus is being spread and the populations that are being affected are a bit different. So that's why we're doing this briefing. In general, the overall risk to the UK population remains low, and the main routes of transmission are through close physical contact. And sex is one of the most popular ways of close physical contact. So spread during sex or transmission during sexual contact is one of the key ways in which we're seeing the infection being transmitted. It can also be transmitted indirectly. So, for example, if someone touches a towel or some bedding and they have lesions, or which are like little ulcers or scabs in their skin, they can shed the virus, put it on the surface of these objects, and then someone else can touch those objects and get the infection themselves. So it's really important to make sure that we're minimizing those routes of transmission. And of course, there's a level of respiratory transmission to the cough or sneeze of someone who has the infection. But from weeks of responding to the outbreak, we know that this is not the main route of transmission. The transmission of the infection continues to be through networks of people who are having sex with one another. Anyone can get monkeypox. It doesn't really matter what your sexual orientation or your gender identity is. The truth is that the way it's currently being transmitted is mainly through sexual contact between men who identify as gay or bisexual, or in general, men who are having sex with other men. And we're usually advising people who fall within these groups to be aware for any unusual rashes or lesions in any part of their body, especially in the genitals, because it's one of the main areas where we see the rashes appearing in people who acquire this infection. Now, the symptoms for monkeypox can be quite diverse. So not every case is going to have the same symptoms, but usually people will get some sort of skin presentation, which looks like a rash or blisters. They may be quite small. Sometimes only one lesion may be found, and they are usually being present in the places where people are having sexual contact. So near the genitals, near the anus, near the mouth are usually places where patients are presenting with a rash. Other symptoms that are maybe not so specific for monkeypox, but that are also seen in cases include a high temperature, a headache, muscle aches or backaches, swollen glands, chills that come with a fever, feeling really tired or exhausted. And in some cases, we're also seeing proctitis, which is the anal or rectal pain or bleeding. Sometimes we have cases that only have proctitis. They only have symptoms that manifest as rectal pain, but that have no rash. So it's also important for clinicians to have a very high level of suspicion, because it can be quite non-specific presentation. Currently in the UK, we have more than 3,000 cases. This is data that we released earlier this week. Most of the cases are in England, and the number of cases we have was climbing really fast throughout July, but in the last few weeks, so in the last 2 weeks of July and the first 2 weeks of August, the rate at which the cases are increasing has slowed down. So while the epidemic is still growing, it seems to be growing at a much slower pace, and we're currently still examining the data to understand regional variations, but also the reasons for the decrease in cases. Most of the cases are in London. However, in more recent weeks, we have seen an increase in cases in some other regions. So these are the number of cases, both confirmed and highly probable, which are two of the case definitions we use, but honestly, they're quite equivalent. And most of the cases will be in London. When we look at the distribution by regions within England, we'll see that in the graph here to the left, you'll see this line in blue that represents the number of cases, the cumulative number of cases in London. And you'll see that London grew really fast, while the rest of England, so areas outside of London, that's the line in black, it didn't increase as fast. But then in more recent weeks, it has continued to increase. And when we look at, we open that box, we see that the southeast, specifically areas around Brighton, and the northwest, so areas around Manchester, are having increases in cases in more recent weeks, with other regions also trailing behind, but with translation there. And just to reassure that this is not an infection that is only affecting men, when we look at the number of cases, we do have mostly men, 99% of the cases are men, but a very small number of cases in women. So we know women could be infected. Some of these cases are transgender women, but also cisgender women. And it's not just an artifact based on how we're finding cases or who we are testing, because when you look at test positivity, out of 2 tests that we're administering in adult men, one of them is coming forward as positive, whereas in tests in women, we have a positivity below 5%. It's around 2%. So we are testing women with compatible symptoms who may have a different infection, but in general, we're not finding monkeypox in women. So we are testing everyone. That we have, we're quite confident that the transmission is happening within these well-defined groups. And to give a bit more context, we conduct interviews or questionnaires with cases that are confirmed as monkeypox, and we have around 700 interviews done so far. And out of the people who we've interviewed, 95% are gay, bisexual, or other men who have sex with men. And what we see is that the people that are acquiring infection, even within gay and bisexual communities, are very similar to people who are acquiring other sexually transmitted infections. Monkeypox is not an STI itself, because it doesn't require sex necessarily to be transmitted, but it's being transmitted in very similar networks. So people who had an STI in the previous year, or people who are having large numbers of partners, more than 10 in the last 3 months, are more likely to acquire the infection. People who are living with HIV are also quite represented in the case mix. So 1 in 4 cases of monkeypox currently is someone who is living with HIV. And among those who are HIV negative, a large percentage is using PrEP. And PrEP is a medication that can be used by people who are HIV negative to prevent from acquiring the virus if they're in contact with someone who is living with HIV and who may not be on treatment or may not be undetectable. And the key thing here is that this is a population that has very strong links with healthcare, has very strong links with sexual health services, and that is being used as an opportunity to deliver the vaccination strategy, which we will be discussing later during this talk. I think this could be relevant to some of you in the call. We have also been asking people where they went on the weeks before they acquired the infection. And only a subset of cases have actually replied to these questions. But what we know is that there is an opportunity to deliver interventions in some of these settings where people are going. This doesn't mean that people are getting the infection in these places. It's not that people are getting the infection in festivals or bars or nightclubs, but it does mean that this is a place where people are going prior to getting infected or prior to developing symptoms. And these are areas where we might be able to implement interventions such as health promotion. This is what we're telling gay men or bisexual men to do. We're doing a lot of targeted approaches for health promotion and advice, but mainly we're asking people if they have any symptoms to take a break from close physical contacts, including sex, so that they can be out of the period in which they could be passing on the infection to someone else. We're asking people to go through channels such as NHS 111 or sexual health services to seek care. And we're also providing guidance on isolation so that people can stop the transmission of the virus. And now, of course, there is advice specifically for settings where people are going, specifically for venues or events that target gay and bisexual men. In general, regardless of whether the venue is a place where sexual activity takes place, there is the opportunity to promote awareness for monkeypox. And we have marketing assets that we will be presenting later today. But the objective is to reinforce behaviors that can prevent passing it on. But there's also venues such as saunas or clubs where sexual activity does take place. And in those cases, regular cleaning is really essential, because we know that people may be getting the infection from just sharing a bench or sharing bedding or towels. So these are key opportunities for our partners to make sure that we're preventing transmission. And we have developed guidance as well to support enhanced cleaning. So that's it for me. I'm happy to field any questions, but I think Chris now from UKHSA is also going to be sharing some of the marketing assets that we have prepared.
Cool. Thank you, Matteo. So we'll just see if there's any questions and then I'll kick off and we'll try and share my screen too. Doesn't sound like there are.
I don't think it's, I've asked anyone who's got questions to put them into the chat. So I'll keep an eye on the chat just in case there's some that comes up.
Okay, so hopefully you can you just let me know if you can see this slide? It should say social assets and posters.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So my name's Chris Howell. I work in the UXA marketing team, and actually I've been working with James very closely on the COVID stuff last year and now more recently on monkeypox. So I'm just going to take you through some of the materials that the teams have produced right from the onset, actually sort of back early in June when this started. So the first set of assets that were done very, very quickly from our wonderful content team are a series of social assets and posters. And, you know, it was very key that we did this quickly to start getting out there and sort of explaining to people almost what do you need to know, what do you need to look for, what is monkeypox, and how can you help the spread. So the team did this very, very quickly, which was brilliant. And they got these out across kind of all of our social channels. There was a mix of posters as well. And these were shared via our campaign resource centre. So it was really key that we got out there with a lot of our stakeholders to sort of give them some assets. And then the next piece of activity that we looked at is that we wanted to look at doing something a bit more creative and a bit more standout, looking at a marketing campaign. So we took a very early cut of some insight that our insight team had done, and some insight that Terence Higgins Trust had done as well. Sort of did a general cut around looking at the awareness levels, understanding levels, and sort of what action are people taking. So we used the very kind of early insights that we had to develop a campaign, which we sort of had a great tagline, which was monkeypox, spot it, stop it. And it was really focused on how we can continue building awareness of monkeypox. We saw that the awareness levels were quite high, but we wanted to make sure that we kept that awareness going, create a better understanding of how it spreads. So whilst there was some level of understanding, there was probably only around 40% really understood how it actually spread. So we wanted to do a bit more around explaining that, and then really encourage people to take action if they think they have it, and sort of really land around the importance of doing that. So we created a number of assets to support this. So the first pieces that we did was a range of posters in A4, A3, and what we call editable. So we're working with stakeholders, they could put their own logo on. Now, we did this quickly and we did this very creatively because we wanted to support a lot of the festivals and events that were out there in the venues. And we wanted to do something that was really eye-catching, that stood out, that captured people's attention, but tapped in a bit to sort of what was going on over summer. So we led with don't let it spoil the fun, or there were some assets that said don't let it spoil summer. And again, it was very, very top line information that we had on there, very key. Spotted a rash with blisters, it could be monkeypox. And then we framed it very much around anyone can get it. And then we talked a bit about how you can catch it. So we brought in a bit more around sort of sharing towels and bed sheets. And this was very much targeted at general public. We didn't want to stigmatize or make any particular groups feel like we were aiming it at them, which is why we very much led with anyone can get it. So we did a series of different very visually engaging posters and sort of tapped into the events and festivals. We supported this with social media assets. So we did 1x1 carousel formats as well. And again, really kind of bright and engaging with some accompanying copy posts. Again, you know, when we're doing posters and socials, we really try not to be too copy heavy or else people don't read it. So it really is a challenge to get that balance of getting enough information across, capture that and drive people to the right place for further information. I also mentioned, I forgot to mention on the posters that we put QR codes on there as well, so that if people didn't want to overtly look like they were going up to read it, they could scan and get taken through to the NHS page. And then we also did an A5 handout, which had a lot more information on. And then we produced some email banners and web banners as well. So if any of the events or venues or people were communicating with any of their audiences, we produced some nice banners that people could use as well to either put on the website or put in an email. Again, very high level, you know, don't let it spoil your summer. If you spot anything, click here to find out more. So this was the first iteration of activity that we did. We are currently doing some research now to look at sort of visually how this landed, what was a takeout, and the messages as well. So it's really important that, you know, this is just not we do it and then that's it. It's really important that we learn from it. We learn what's resonating. We look at the situation now so that we can look at adapting it and continue to make it relevant for people. So all of these assets we have on our campaign resource centre, where people can go on and download. I think what's been really positive is I've seen around 650 downloads of that. So it seems really positive that people are going on to use it. And these were shared. James did an amazing job by sharing these out across sort of all of our regional teams, key stakeholders, local authorities, etc., for people to use. And then this is just a piece that our team who manage all the vaccines, they've produced a number of leaflets, etc., which sit on gov.uk. So it contains all information on smallpox vaccination and lots of information around sort of explaining why people have to wait. So at the moment, we've got a really great kind of resource centre for many, many different assets that people can use to help get that message out. So I will stop sharing and just see if anyone's got any questions on that. And I hope that was useful.
Thanks, Chris. That was really useful. Mike, it's your meeting, so I'll let you field the questions.
Sure. Carly, do you want to come in? I was shocked that you hadn't come in earlier, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I was just wondering, had a comment on the accessibility of posters. Actually, we always try and avoid using full caps, especially for people that have got dyslexia and other kind of reading accessibility needs. I wonder whether there was any other versions that are shareable, and whether you had any feedback on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we always do try to accommodate that. So we did a slightly different version, a black and white sort of easy read version to hopefully accommodate that. But again, great feedback. We can take that back and we can see as well out of the insight and research whether anything comes out of that too. But yeah, we always try and make sure that we accommodate that. So thanks, Carly, for asking that.
Lee, do you want to come in? Lee Tosey? We can't hear you, mate. I think you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm mute. There we go. I'm muted. There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
yeah.
got you.
I run Jamie HP. We run loads of sex on premises events. So we produced a video back in July, which has had 105,000 hits, which was about monkeypox. The posters that came in, we had a couple of posters that came in. People just didn't bother to read them because they were in that blue and grey, whatever. But I've not seen any other posters since. So, and we've got 78,000 members and we've not seen any of these posters. So why haven't we seen them?
Okay, well, I can take that back to the team that I work with to find out why, Lee. I can't answer that, but I will definitely take that back. We did actually do a version which I haven't included on that specifically for sex on premises. So leave that with me. I will take it back and make sure that you guys get the links that you need to the right assets for you to use. So apologies for me if you didn't get that information.
Okay. Just one other question for you. We've noticed. It's certainly okay. Let's call a spade a spade. It is amongst gay and bisexual men or men homosexual men at the moment. So, and therefore, under those circumstances, I know that we don't want to be stigmatised. But while there's a shortage of vaccines, which there is at the moment, which we know. There's a message like we've been putting out in the club, and that's saying to people that are on PrEP, wear condoms again, just because that might stop some of the aspects of the monkeypox, the worst aspects in the genital area. Is that been done?
So from the campaign activity that we've done, we haven't got into very specifics like that. We've kept our messaging very general. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't work with you guys. If you feel creatively something like that works and you wanted something that was more specific, I'm sure we can take that back and have a look at that for you.
Yeah, it just makes complete sense at the moment, because that's what about 80% of the people that come through my door that have had monkeypox have told me they've had it in certain areas of their body, which could have been prevented if I'd have told them to wear a condom.
Yeah.
And because they're on PrEP, they don't.
And I think these are all really, really great insights. And I know James will kind of support me on this, is that we've sort of had a balance of, we've gone out with slightly generic message because we haven't, been going to specific sort of audiences, but we can absolutely take that on board and look at more specific assets for you that we can work with you guys on. Very happy to do that.
Thank you. Sorry, Chris, I just want to make sure that we're doing some fact checking and we're demystifying things that are not true. The truth is that condoms alone do not prevent.
No, we're not saying that.
Sorry, I'm trying to reply. What I'm trying to say is that people who use condoms may still acquire monkeypox, very much so,
Yeah.
because of direct skin-to-skin contact in the pubis area, in the thighs, in the abdomen. And we have definitely seen that in cases that are coming through clinical pathways. So I just want to steer you against thinking that condom alone will protect people from getting monkeypox, because that's not the message we're trying to push forward.
Well, that's certainly not the message we've been given. We've been saying to people that you can still get monkeypox from skin-to-skin contact, but some of the worst aspects of monkeypox are in the genital areas, and therefore can that be? We can then maybe prevent the spots from being there rather than somewhere else on the body. So we've certainly not said it stops it.
Unless the condom is a full latex suit, it won't do that, because the condom will only protect the penis itself. So areas like the testicles or the genitals will still be exposed and can very much develop the lesion.
Right, fair enough. Then we'll stop giving that message.
Lee, can I suggest, and sorry, Matteo, to interject, can I suggest that I loop you in with James and the team, and then you can have a robust conversation and see if there's something else to just feed into that, so that there may be potential ways of putting it across that give people support you and your audience, but also sort of reflect the position that Matteo is trying to sort of present. Is that fair? I'll direct it.
Yeah, of course. Sorry.
Perfect. No. It's great question. Thank you, Carly.
Yeah, hello, sorry, me again. Is it possible to get like a one sheet that we can share with venues in terms of the advice that we're asking people to take? I know we've had some cases in Bristol, and we have been speaking particularly to our queer clubs and our kind of fetish clubs about how they extend cleaning, all of that kind of stuff. But it would be really helpful if we have like a one sheet with the downloads to the posters, with all of the advice that's needed, that we can just distribute out via our licensing teams so that it's really easily accessible.
Thanks, Carly. I'm pretty sure, I think what we'll do is off the back of this, I'll liaise with James and I'll do an email out to everyone that's attended with as much information as we can sort of muster, including possibly a one-pager if that's possible. Just coming into, Helen Corkin is coming in. What are the main concerns of the nighttime economy? I mean, just a question. Obviously, we're suggesting that there is very much at the moment the infections are resonating predominantly around male sort of LGBTQ plus sort of environments, but is there a concern that this is going to reflect or develop out into the wider nighttime economy in terms of general commercial environments, or is at the moment what is the projection, I suppose, is the concern? Helen, I hope I put that across in the right way, but if I haven't, please interject, come in.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering, as we've got an opportunity to chat with you, to hear directly from you what some of your concerns were and what we could do to support you. Sorry, I'm from the UK Health Security Agency in London.
I don't know if Matteo, you can answer that, or
Yes,
or
definitely.
Chris.
Sorry, it was to people involved in the industry directly rather than colleagues. Thanks.
No, absolutely. I think that is a key concern. And we definitely shared that concern, especially at the beginning of the outbreak, which is why we were closely monitoring whether the people who were coming forward and being diagnosed with monkeypox were changing week by week. So we were looking at whether there was any indication that the case mix was changing. And that's why we started doing these in-depth interviews and questionnaires. And after 3 months of identification of the first cases, we have seen quite stable demographics in the case mix. So the proportion of cases that are gay or bisexual has barely changed. The proportion of cases that are having multiple sexual partners have barely changed. The truth is that, for example, if this infection could be spread more widely in social interactions, for example, we would have seen a change in the distribution of cases that are gay or bisexual, because many of the spaces that these people go to are also attended by people who are heterosexual or who have different identities or sexual orientations. We would also see that there is a disconnect between the number of sexual partners and the likelihood of being diagnosed with monkeypox, because it would just be social interaction. So someone could be monogamous and go to a bar or a club and be exposed to the same air and then get the infection. And the truth is we have not seen that. That's not to say that it cannot happen, that people cannot get the infection socially, but it's not a risk that is high enough for us to think that there is a risk to the larger population, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Mattia. Sorry, I had to check to see if I was on mute standard. The Dawn Phillips has asked, Lee, you suggested that you had a video that was put together. It would be interesting to have a look at that or share that once, possibly with the James's team, and then off the back of that, possibly the wider group. Just coming over, Antoine, I know you're on holiday. Thank you for jumping in. Have you got a question?
Hi, good morning. So it's super early here where I am. It's about 25 minutes to 8. We did an event in Manchester a few months ago and had a very good meeting with the commissioning population health team, and they came down to the venue.
Sorry, Antoine, can I just get you to speak up a bit, because you're quite quiet. I don't know exactly. Sorry to be a pain. I just think we're struggling to hear you. Thank you.
If that makes a difference. Yeah. Yeah. So we had a meeting with the commissioning health population health team in Manchester, and also somebody from the health authority and from one of the social and sexual health clinics, and they seemed highly concerned about contraction from contact with surfaces, and they took us through a whole bit of things that they wanted us to do at our event about keeping surfaces clean throughout, and also about how we clean the spaces post our event. And during the event, I mean, there was only so much you can do when a space is really crowded, because you can't necessarily clean a sofa or a chair or something else every time somebody gets up. It's literally impossible to do. And I think it probably might be very good to create some kind of poster or something else that we can have in venues and spaces for people about cleaning surfaces or the importance of them. What we decided to do was to get like anti-bac. They suggested we get anti-bac and like hand towels and other things to keep around the spaces so people can clean themselves. But if we're not putting out the messages to people, especially in sex clubs, that the cleaning of surfaces is going to be really vital in terms of maybe providing yourself a little bit of extra protection, people won't know to do it. So for us, it was almost impossible to do. But I think if this is the message we want to get out, that this is contracted very easily by surfaces, it would be, I think, very good for us to have something we can put around venues so people can do it themselves, as long as we as the organizers actually provide the materials for people to clean the surfaces, especially when it comes to sexual or play equipment.
Thanks, Anton. I'll just come back on that briefly, and Matteo might want to say more, but I know we do have assets. I think Matteo shared one in his presentation for venues. I'm not sure off the top of my head how appropriate they are for everybody in a venue, but we can definitely take that away and look to create something that's more user-friendly if the current materials aren't.
Yes, James, just to add, I think this is definitely the kind of feedback we want for these materials we're putting forward. So I think if I could get support from yourself and Chris, maybe to cascade some of these feedback so that we can revise the materials, that'd be great.
Thanks, and thanks, Antoine, for that feedback. Sorry. Just Miles Hanlon's coming, asking the question of, has any work been done with the universities? We have invited quite a few of the universities, but as you can appreciate, August is a very slow period for unis before they get to the craziness of September and October. So the question is, has there been any work done with universities in particular? James?
Yes, so we've worked with some individual universities that have approached us so far, but we're also looking to make sure that we are cascading messages to universities and making sure that they're briefed ahead of term starting. So that's ongoing at the moment.
Okay, all right, that's great, thank you. Right, Lucy, will you be sending on these materials, providing a link to them? We're also looking for what best materials. So I think probably what we're going to do, as I suggested, is we will do an email out in conjunction with James, Matteo, Chris and the team, get all of this information through the links and make sure it's disseminated to everybody. And those who, I will also, if James is okay, potentially drop an email in so that if anyone's got any pertinent questions, they can pick up with James and the team. Are you okay with that, James? Sorry to sort of pitch you out there before you've agreed.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's what I'm here for. And just on the materials, we've got quite an in-depth stakeholder pack that we can definitely share with everyone here. That's got all of the assets in. It's got background info, Q&As. So it should be everything you need, apart from the things we discussed on the call, that we can look to pull together.
Yeah, I mean, we have sent the pack out to our full database. So, I mean, that's something the toolkit wise we have done. So if you've missed that or not part of our database, then quite happy to get that across to you within this email. So just last question. Has anyone got any other questions that you'd want to?
I have one more question from Mattis, if that's possible.
Sure, go for it, Lee.
Yeah, a question I'm asked all the time, because I've got a number of people who come in the door that have had monkeypox. Can they get it again?
So this is a question where we don't have direct evidence from monkeypox, but we have evidence from other infections that are very similar. So monkeypox is part of the same family of viruses that cause smallpox. And we know that smallpox did not cause repeat infections because there was lifelong immunity, meaning that once that someone has the infection, they are protected for life. We expect this to be the same for monkeypox, but of course, that's an expectation that still needs to be proven with data. So far, we have not seen anyone get infection more than once, and we're definitely preparing systems to identify that when it happens. But the message we're putting forward is that people will probably be protected after the first infection.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mattia. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay. Listen, if there are questions that you still have to ask, we'll definitely be disseminating the information and the email addresses of James and his team so that you can pick up separate to this. James, is there anything that you want to add, or you happy where they are? I think there's some really good insight there, and I think that can develop as we move forward.
I completely agree. I think this is really useful so far. I think it's probably, looking at the time, it's probably time to bring in Steve from NHS England, who is going to give a quick update to everyone on the vaccine rollout, because I know that will be of interest to quite a lot of people here.
Brilliant. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, good. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. It's nice to meet you. Hello, my name's Steve. I'm National Director for Vaccination and Screening at NHS England. So I look after routine immunisation, COVID-19 vaccination, screening, and now monkeypox and polio vaccination. So I thought I would just give you a quick perspective on where we are at the moment, and importantly, probably what's happening next, because I think we recognise that there's quite a degree of concern about monkeypox and also quite a lot of interest in vaccination. So just to kind of step back for a second, I think it's worth saying that when monkeypox was identified in the UK HSA colleagues worked incredibly hard and procured pretty much all of the available vaccine. And that meant that the NHS in England, alongside health services in the devolved administrations, had access to an initial tranche of vaccine that allowed people to be vaccinated where they were contacts of people who had monkeypox, and also importantly to roll out a pre-exposure programme, which is the particular focus of us. So as of kind of yesterday, the NHS in England has got 120 clinics operating across the regions. 25 of those are in London, but that should give you a bit of an idea about the spread of services across the rest of the country. They are being primarily run by sexual health services. I'll touch on that in a second. And I have to say, colleagues in sexual health services who are under quite considerable pressure already have really stepped up and been absolutely fantastic in helping with this rollout, and are working very many hours to support people with vaccination. We're not doing any national call and recall, and the reason that it's been set up primarily around sexual health services at the moment is because of the supply constraint. The vaccination programme is currently targeted, so it's targeted at those who are most at risk. And in the main, those are people who are known to sexual health services, but not exclusively, and I will make sure I cover that. So sexual health services have primarily been contacting people either through the phone or more usually sending text messages, having identified those who are more at risk. The vaccine has been allocated to those clinics in two ways. One, through a ratio that is relative to the number of people who are known to sexual health services, but then that has been adjusted to reflect the epidemiology. So London has had the most vaccines supplied to it because that's where most of the cases were. And as colleagues from UKSA, HSA said, NTIA has said, the focus of this was an outbreak response to try and interrupt transmission as well as to protect individuals. So with about 35,000 vaccines have been delivered to clinics across the country, and as at yesterday, 25,000 vaccinations have been given. We're doing about 7,000 or 8,000 a week, and some of those have been through mass vaccination sites, and some have been through very, very targeted pop-ups in certain events. There's a small amount of supply that's remaining from the stock that we currently have access to. So there's a couple of thousand doses that have been allocated to clinics and are going out over the course of this week. And then there's about 5,000 doses that are left in central supplies that will be made available to clinics probably in the next 7 to 10 days. That'll take the number of vaccines distributed for the pre-exposure programme to around 42,000, and we anticipate that those will largely be used towards the end of August. I'll come back to the next stage of the programme in a second, which covers when the next amount of vaccine comes into the country. But I thought it might be helpful just to touch on a little bit of the work that we've done with some of yourselves and some colleagues to support people who work in sex on-prem venues as well as people who attend. As I said earlier, the primary focus of the campaign has been around those known to sexual health services, but those that at UKHSA have recommended are considered for the pre-exposure programme also extends to staff who work in sex on-prem venues who may handle linen, etc. in the way that Matteo described, and also those who attend attend a sex on-prem venue or participate in group sex. And so clearly, whilst there are some people who are known to sexual health services, it is also important for us to recognise that there are people who would fit the criteria who are not known to sexual health services, and in those circumstances we have to rely on people to self-declare. So there's a set of things that have happened so far to try and support people who work or attend sex on-prem venues. So in London there was some awareness raising done, and a QR code was shared out with people to try and direct them to walk-in clinics at Guy's and St Thomas's. There's been individual cards shared by one of the sexual health services in Mortimer Market that has directed people who've attended other venues to their clinics and allowed them to book. And there's a pilot this week in Bristol, I can't remember exactly which day, again to support the vaccination of people who work in sex on-prem venues. We've vaccinated about 500 people who work in sex on-prem venues, primarily in London at this stage. I think it's fair to say that because there is considerable interest in the vaccine, what was intended as a relatively controlled pathway for people who had physically attended a venue being signposted for the opportunity to be vaccinated, that got shared quite widely. Because it was a QR code, etc., and it allowed anyone who had access to it to book or to be directed to the walk-in services. And so in the context of trying to make sure that the vaccine is offered to those who are most at risk, and in the context of the supply constraint that we've currently got, we've focused much more on inviting people. As I said, we're about to, during September, get an additional stock into the country. So 100,000 doses. We expect it to come in late September, and then we'll be in a position to make that available to services. And at that point, we would like also to work with yourselves and other colleagues to try and put in place a slightly more consistent and robust pathway for workers in sex on-prem venues and those who attend. Also, though, reflecting the fact that we'll need to make sure it's a reasonably controlled pathway, so that it continues to target and support those who are most at risk. The final thing I should probably say, and happy to answer any questions alongside Matteo and colleagues, is that when vaccines are being given, there's no national record of it. We felt that was very important in terms of privacy, and so unlike other vaccination programs, that's not recorded in any national system. We get told by the clinics the number of people that have been vaccinated to allow us to see progress, but the record of the vaccination remains within the individual's record in a sexual health clinic that's providing the vaccination at the moment. I could probably go on talking about all sorts of other bits and pieces on vaccination, but perhaps if I stop, Michael, and I'm happy to take any questions from colleagues.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks. Is there any questions for Steve with regard to the vaccinations? What would we look for, or who should we contact if we would like to advise our sex on-prem workers or attendees? In terms of the NHS setup, is that what you're saying, Lucy? Steve, I mean, in getting the vaccine, yeah. So how would you advise to move forward?
So, I mean, people should have my email address. If not, I'll stick it in the chat box in a second. I'm happy for people to contact me, and I will point you to the right. I'm not the right person to fix all of it, but I will point you to regional contacts, and they will be able to help work with yourselves on putting in place a pathway to vaccination sites. As I said, just to manage expectations, that is more likely to be widely available late September when we get the next supply into the UK.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Any other questions for Steve on vaccinations? As we said, I mean, we are going to circulate everyone's email on a follow-up email. So if you've got further questions, you'll be able to hit Steve up. By the sounds of it, I could hear your emails in the background, so I think you're quite busy as it is in terms of emails coming through. Okay, James, is there anything else that we need to add, or is there anyone else that is going to just finish off here?
So that is everything from us. I think the feedback has been really useful, and I've definitely taken some points away that we're going to look into. I just really kind of like to see if there are any other comments from people on the call, because one thing in particular that I'm looking at the moment is, I think as Steve said, there are groups of people who aren't known to sexual health services and obviously are harder for us to reach. So I really just wanted to see if anyone on the call had any suggestions or feedback about how it would be best to do that. Because obviously there are lots of different groups of people, and it's quite tricky. We're working with local and regional partners, but any insight people have would be really useful.
Carly?
Yeah, I would say you're probably talking to a group of conveners. We've got large audiences of people that are that are community spirited and want to share messages. So actually going via the clubs, via the promoters, via the queer communities themselves, I think is one of those sort of easy routes through to spread this message out. I'd also say, I mean, the university's idea is a really good one, but I would also say that if a city centre has bids, they are often in connection with those businesses, and certainly wherever there is a nighttime community, there will be people that can share a message for you. So just making sure that that it's easy, really, really easy to share that message so that we can pass them on.
Thanks, Carly. Miles?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, I think in terms of the university environment, obviously we have the new academic year just about to start, and we have a whole array of first-year students joining a new university city or town who might not be known to sexual health services. So I think there's a role for universities to play in disseminating a lot of the awareness and the information around monkeypox, specifically the vaccine as well, and kind of who might be more susceptible to it, who's at risk. And there's definitely a role for the universities to play in that. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. That's some really useful feedback, and we've tried to make it as easy as possible to download and share all the information. So it's really easy to download all of our assets from the Campaign Resource Centre, and all the links are in the pack. But if there's anything that you think it would be good to have as well once you've seen all of our materials, then do shout. And Miles, just on the universities point, I know that a colleague of mine's talking to Universities UK separately around a whole load of public health messaging on everything that's going on at the moment. So COVID, polio, all of the issues. So this will be included in that. So that's definitely happening. So anything that you can do to help disseminate those messages to universities would be very helpful as well. Thank you.
Can I just add something?
Sure, go for it, Lee.
Yeah, what it is, we send out a newsletter once a week, which goes out to 76,000 people. So, and it goes across the country. Now, my biggest frustration has been so far is knowing it. Like, so for instance, like guys would say that there's a walking clinic, and then so we go for a whole week where there've been a walking clinic. On Friday they cancel it. So you can imagine the frustration out there because people are scared and frightened. But primarily, what is there a way that we can say to people that we can give a direct message to people to say this is where they're doing it in your area? Because I was getting calls from Bath, from Bristol, from Newcastle, from Manchester, and primarily we were dealing with London. But at the same time, I just want a comprehensive list, or people that make the decisions to make those decisions on a Monday and not on a Friday when they're going to cancel something.
Hey, yes, Steve, I'll hand that one over to you.
Yeah, thanks, James. Nice hospital pass there. So Lee, I think so. We've talked about this already, and being responsible. So I think a couple of things. The message at the moment, I think that would be most helpful to share. I appreciate it's not an easy message to share, but is that at the moment we're trying to target the vaccine supply at those who are most at risk, and so people should wait to be contacted by the NHS. When we get to September and we start to see the additional supply come in, that should allow us to reintroduce some elements of walk-in clinics, etc. But we will need to look at what the epidemiology is suggesting at that time. I agree and take the point about the timeliness of communication around changes in decisions. To be fair to Guy's and St Thomas's, they will, and everybody else actually, everyone was working very hard to try and get sufficient vaccine supply to allow walk-in. But as I said, the pathway that had been put in place, which was intended to be quite focused, became much more widely shared, and it was really important that we focus the vaccine on those most at risk. So that's the kind of context to work in. But the message at the moment would be, please wait for the NHS to contact you.
Okay.
Thank you. Carly.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that wait for the NHS to contact you point. Is that because I might have vagued out and missed it, so excuse me. Is that because through contact tracing, like how, or do you surely you don't hold data on people's sexual orientation and like how are you identifying those people? And what happens if they're not registered with the GP?
Yeah, so they don't have to be registered with the GP is the first thing. And at the moment, we are identifying people through sexual health services, as in rather sexual health services are identifying eligible individuals and contacting them. And that's been, the decision was made around in that context to try and prioritise those who are highest at risk. If you go back to Matteo's very helpful, where are the cases arising, that's the rationale for the decision in the context of constrained vaccine supply. As I said, we were very conscious that not everybody is known to sexual health services, and so we did open up pathways for people who attended or worked in sex on prem venues to go to vaccination centres. That relies on every clinic has a screening process in place to try and make sure that somebody is eligible, but clearly, you rely on what people say against the criteria of participation in Group X or attending a sex on prem venue, etc. And it became clear that the pathways, which were QR codes and largely a digital access, had been shared very widely, which opened up the potential that lower risk people would kind of hop over those who are high risk. So that's where we we refocused on sexual health services, primarily contacting people. As I say, when we get to September, we've got more supply. We want our regional teams to work with yourselves or your colleagues to try and put more structured signposting and pathways in for people who work at sex on prem venues or attend sex on prem venues. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and Steve, just to add briefly as well, I think, Carly, that's where my question came from as well, around trying to contact people who are harder for us to reach because they're not necessarily engaged. So that's both in terms of the vaccine, but also in terms of health promotion and making people aware. And just kind of to add to what Steve said a bit as well, obviously sexual health clinics have got their own databases of patients, and the flags that that they're tapped into are mainly people who've had a bacterial STI in the last 12 months or who are on PrEP. So those are the criteria that sexual health clinics have used so far to identify people at higher risk and call them for vaccinations.
Can I make one more suggestion to you? Because as I said, I run sex on the premises venues. That we get some people to come in to the venue and to give out cards at the venue, which will reach like young black men, Asian men that are far less likely to go to the clinics because there's suspicion of vaccinations. It is, you know, can we do that? Because between now and the end of September, that's another 8-week gap for this to spread into the community.
Really good.
So the straightforward answer to that is yes, Lee, and that the London, it's not just covering London now, but what started as a London Sex on Prem working group with the NHS deployment programme is absolutely working through that. As I've said, we need to make sure that it's a pathway that is unique to an individual, not identifiable to an individual, but unique to an individual. What clinics are also doing is, with the supply that they have remaining, is to make sure that some of the outreach activities are prioritised. So there was an outreach to Black Pride that supported vaccination of just short of 40 people who probably wouldn't have attended sexual health services in the way that you've just described. So we're continuing to do all of that work. We have to do it in the context of the vaccine that's available. We can't do anything about the fact that it takes until September for the next batch to be made, as it were. But yes, as a point of principle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Lee. I know we're just about to broach time. Is anyone got any other questions, or you know, as I say, we're happy to disseminate those questions or do the intros that you can contact directly. I think what this has done is a really good start to opening up the conversation with some clarity rather than anecdotal or sort of conversations around what we think is happening with monkeypox. We can get some real-time sort of questions and open up the debate and possibly draw more people in. We are working with Skidler at the moment to actually get a full database of LGBTQ+ promoters so that we can possibly look at expanding that conversation. So there's a lot that we're doing at the moment which I think can support and just get that message out. So okay, James, have you got anything else that you want to add, or are you happy with where we're coming to?
No, I'm very happy. I think this, like I said earlier, this has been a really useful session, and kind of like we said, we'll make sure that all of the materials we talked about get disseminated to the group, and the stakeholder pack is with all of the information, and that's regularly refreshed as new things happen and we get more information. So I'll make sure that that keeps getting circulated. And I can just see a dog saying goodbye to us. Hello. And the other thing is, I think we would be happy to come back and speak to this group and others as well in the future. Okay. Probably, I think it'll probably be useful once we get towards the end of September and the next batch comes in, then we can discuss plans then.
Perfect. Well, we're quite happy to orchestrate that. And I'd hope everyone on here is happy to dive in, and we'd probably be able to get a wider group given the fact that no one will be on holiday, bar Antoine, who is quite happily doing it from his lounger bed by the pool by the sounds of things. So listen, thanks everyone for being involved. Really appreciate the feedback and the constructive questioning. Let's keep it moving forward and get as much out of this as possible. Thanks to James, Steve, Matteo, Chris for your expertise and your input, and I'm sure we're going to be able to do it again come September when we've got some clarity on vaccination pools getting stronger. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.